Trust is a strange thing. Most people think it's built on big moments, promises made at weddings, contracts signed in ink, or grand gestures of loyalty. But in reality, trust is a quiet thing. It's the air you breathe when you think you're safe. You don't notice how fragile it is until someone drops it, and you're left picking the jagged pieces of your own heart out of the floor. When I built my business, I thought I was building a future. I thought I was creating a sanctuary where the people I loved could thrive. What I didn't realize was that I was actually building a stage for a betrayal so intimate, so calculated, that it would eventually leave me standing in the ruins of my own life, wondering if I ever really knew the people I called family. My name is Mariah Ellis, and the woman who destroyed everything I worked for wasn't a competitor from a rival firm. She wasn't a stranger with a grudge. She was my cousin. She was the same cousin who used to braid my hair on humid summer afternoons while we whispered about the boys we liked. She was the same girl who sat across from me at every Thanksgiving dinner for 25 years. She was the woman who promised me with tears of gratitude in her eyes that family would always come first. Her name was Danielle Carter, and she didn't just steal from me. She didn't just lie to me. She dismantled my existence from the inside out, using the very keys I gave her to lock me out of my own dream. I want to ask you something before we go any deeper. Have you ever let someone back into your life because they're family, even when your gut was screaming at you to run? Have you ever mistaken a shared history for a shared loyalty? Drop a family first in the comments if you've ever paid the price for being too kind to someone who shared your blood. This isn't just a story about a failed business. It's a story about the terrifying moment you realize that the person standing next to you isn't guarding your back, they're measuring it for the knife. This is the cost of a second chance. 7 years ago, if you had told me I would eventually run one of the most respected marketing agencies in the city, I probably would have laughed. And then I would have gone back to counting my pennies to see if I could afford the good kind of ramen that week. My life back then was a masterclass in survival. I was working 2 part-time jobs that drained my soul. During the day, I was at a dry cleaner, breathing in steam and chemicals for minimum wage. At night, I was a voice on a headset in a windowless call center, taking complaints from people who didn't care if I lived or died. I was exhausted. I was broke. And I was becoming dangerously close to disappearing into the gray machinery of a life I didn't want. But I had a vision. I grew up watching my parents give 40 years of their lives to a furniture factory, only to be handed a cardboard box and a good luck handshake when the plant moved overseas. I saw the way their spirits broke when they realized their loyalty meant nothing to the people at the top. I decided, right there at that stained kitchen table, that I was done being a pawn. I was going to be the architect. I was going to build something that belonged to me, something that couldn't be taken away by a corporate memo or a bad quarter. I named it Ellis Creative Solutions. At the start, the agency was just me and a laptop I'd bought with 3 months of overtime pay. I was the CEO, the designer, the salesperson, and the janitor. I spent my nights teaching myself how to code, how to manipulate branding psychology, and how to navigate the shark-infested waters of digital algorithms. I worked until my eyes felt like they were filled with broken glass. I worked until my fingers were so stiff I had to run them under hot water just to keep typing. There were nights when the loneliness of the grind felt like a physical weight, pressing me down into the linoleum. I failed a lot in those early months. I lost small clients because I didn't know how to manage their expectations. I made mistakes that cost me money I didn't have. But every failure was a brick. I picked them up, I wiped off the dust, and I added them to the foundation. Because I knew one thing for certain. Failure is just information. Regret is the only thing that's fatal. Slowly, the kitchen table empire started to grow. A local bakery turned into a regional car dealership. The car dealership turned into a tech startup. Within 4 years, I wasn't eating ramen anymore. I was hiring people. I was moving into a high-rise office with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city I had finally conquered. When I saw my name etched into the frosted glass of the entrance, I didn't see vanity. I saw every sleepless night. I saw every sacrifice. I saw the daughter of 2 factory workers who had finally made it. I thought the hard part was over. I thought that once you build the walls high enough, the world can't hurt you. What I didn't know was that the most dangerous person in my life wasn't a competitor trying to outbid me. It was the woman I was about to invite into the very heart of the fortress I'd built. In my family, blood is thicker than water wasn't just a saying, it was a law. It was the invisible thread that tied us together, regardless of how frayed that thread became. And Danielle was the master of pulling those threads until they snapped. While I was building my empire, Danielle was building a disaster. We grew up like sisters, but as adults, our paths looked like a map of 2 different worlds. Every time I reached a new milestone, my first office, my first 5-figure contract, Danielle reached a new rock bottom. There was always an excuse: a toxic boss who didn't understand her brilliance, a jealous coworker who sabotaged her, a bad run of luck that lasted for a decade. Then came the phone call that changed everything. "Mariah?" Her voice was a ragged whisper, the kind of sound that makes your heart drop into your stomach before you even hear the words. "I don't know who else to call. I'm about to lose the apartment. I've been out of work for 3 months, and I just feel like I'm disappearing. I just need one person to believe in me, just one chance to prove I'm not the failure everyone thinks I am." I looked around my office. I looked at the success I had built, and for the first time, I felt a twinge of something that felt like guilt. Why did I have so much while she had so little? We came from the same dirt. We shared the same grandmother. I should have remembered the history. I should have remembered the money she borrowed and never returned when we were 20. I should have remembered the way she used to twist stories until she was always the victim and everyone else was the villain. But family history has a way of blinding you with nostalgia. I didn't see the woman who had burned every bridge she'd ever crossed. I saw the little girl who used to hold my hand when the lightning got too loud. "Come into the office tomorrow, Danielle," I said, ignoring the cold chill at the base of my neck. "We'll find a place for you." I created a role for her: administrative assistant. It was supposed to be a soft landing. She would handle the schedules, the basic client follow-ups, the digital filing, the boring stuff that I was too busy to manage. I brought her in, sat her down, and gave her the keys to the castle. "This business is my baby, Danielle," I told her, looking her dead in the eye. "I've bled for this. I need someone in this chair that I don't have to second guess. I need someone I can trust with my life." She grabbed my hand, her eyes swimming with tears of gratitude. "Mariah, you are the only one who didn't give up on me. I promise you I will protect this business like it's my own. You can trust me more than anyone in this world." I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her, because if you can't trust your own blood, who can you? That was my second mistake. I didn't realize that for someone like Danielle, a second chance isn't an opportunity to change. It's just a fresh audience for the same old play. I'd invited a wolf into the fold, and I was so busy feeling proud of my own generosity that I didn't notice she was already sharpening her teeth on my letterhead. At first, Danielle was a dream employee. She was the first one in, the last one out, and she constantly filled the office with praise. "You're a genius, Mariah," she'd say, bringing me a coffee exactly how I liked it. "I'm just so lucky to learn from the best." It's funny how easily we swallow flattery when we want to believe we've made the right choice. I was so busy feeling like a mentor that I didn't notice the subtle shift in the atmosphere. It started with the small things, the kind of glitches you ignore when you're running a million miles an hour. A client would mention they sent an attachment I never saw. A meeting would get pushed back because of a scheduling conflict that Danielle swore she told me about. "My internet must have flickered," she'd say with a helpless shrug. "I'm so sorry, Mariah. I'll fix it right now." I told myself to be patient. I told myself she was just learning the ropes. But then the first real blow landed, and it came from the one place I thought was untouchable, Mr. Rodriguez. Mr. Rodriguez had been my day one client. He was a stern, old-school businessman who ran a massive construction firm. He didn't care about flashy marketing jargon. He cared about results, and above all, communication. He was the backbone of my monthly revenue. One Tuesday afternoon, my cell phone rang. It was Mr. Rodriguez, but he wasn't calling to give me a new lead. He was shouting, "I've been trying to reach you for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. We have a crisis with the regional campaign and you're ghosting me? I thought we had a partnership." My stomach did a slow, sickening somersault. 2 weeks, Mr. Rodriguez? I haven't seen a single email from you. I check my phone every hour. "I've sent 4 emails and left 3 messages with your assistant," he barked. "If you're too big for the small guys now, just say so. Consider our contract terminated." The line went dead. I sat there in the silence of my beautiful office, my heart hammering against my ribs. I walked out to Danielle's desk. She was typing away, looking perfectly serene. "Danielle," I said, my voice trembling, "did Mr. Rodriguez call or email? He says he's been trying to reach us for 14 days. She looked up, her expression a mask of confusion. "No. I mean, I saw a couple of things that looked like automated spam from his address. I thought he'd been hacked, so I didn't want to bother you with them. I think I moved them to the trash to keep your workspace clean." I pushed past her and grabbed the mouse. I opened the business inbox. Nothing. I opened the spam folder. Nothing. Then I opened the deleted folder. There they were. 4 high-priority emails from Mr. Rodriguez, marked as urgent, deleted. My hands started to shake. "Danielle, these aren't spam. These are marked urgent. Why would you delete these without asking me?" She didn't apologize. She didn't look horrified. She just sighed, a long, weary sound that made it feel like I was the one being difficult. "Mariah, I'm just trying to protect your time. You're always saying how overwhelmed you are. I'm trying to manage the noise so you can focus on the big stuff. It was just a mistake." A mistake that cost me my biggest contract. A mistake that felt like a deliberate amputation. I wanted to fire her right then. I wanted to scream. But then I thought about our mothers. I thought about the family dinner coming up in 3 weeks. I thought about the one chance she'd begged for. I chose family. I believed it was just a lapse in judgment. I sat her down, gave her a lecture on client priority, and went back into my office to try and save the unsavable. I didn't realize that Danielle wasn't managing the noise. She was silencing the heartbeat of my company, and she was just getting started. The loss of Mr. Rodriguez was a wound, but I treated it like a freak accident. I doubled down. I worked 16-hour days trying to fill the revenue gap, while Danielle became a shoulder to cry on. She was so sympathetic. "It's okay, Mariah," she'd say while rubbing my shoulders. "Clients like him are dinosaurs. We don't need that kind of negativity. We're better off." But better off started looking like a bankruptcy filing. Over the next few months, the glitches didn't stop. They evolved. Invoices were suddenly being sent with the wrong banking information. Follow-up calls were being forgotten. But the most disturbing trend was the silence. Clients who had been with me for years, people who sent me Christmas cards, were suddenly failing to renew their contracts. And when they left, they didn't leave angry. They left quietly. Then came the afternoon that pulled the veil back. I was working late, and the office was empty except for the hum of the air conditioner. Danielle had left her personal laptop open on her desk, something she never did. Usually, she guarded that thing like it held the crown jewels. but she'd stepped out to grab celebration drinks for a small win we'd had, and a notification popped up. It was a CC on an email from Priya, a boutique fashion owner and a client I had personally mentored. The subject line read, "Agreement for Independent Strategy." My heart didn't just drop, it turned to ice. I shouldn't have looked. I knew the ethics of privacy. But the Ellis Creative letterhead was visible in the attachment preview, yet the body of the email was addressed only to Danielle. I clicked. "Hi, Priya," the email from Danielle's private account read. "As we discussed in our meeting yesterday, I've drafted the independent contract. Since I'm the one doing 90% of the creative heavy lifting anyway, and Mariah's agency is becoming a bit unstable, it makes more sense for you to work with me directly. I can offer you the same Ellis quality at 40% of the cost, since I don't have her overhead. Let's keep this between us until her current contract officially expires." I felt like the floor had vanished. I wasn't just reading a betrayal, I was reading a manual on how to skin a business alive. Danielle wasn't just a bad assistant, she was a parasite. She was using my office, my electricity, my reputation, and my proprietary strategy decks to pitch herself to my own clients while I sat 10 feet away paying her salary. Unstable. She had called the business she was supposedly protecting unstable to the very people who kept the lights on. I looked at the timestamps. She had been doing this for months. Every deleted email wasn't a mistake, it was a clearance. She was clearing the path so that when a client felt neglected by me, she could swoop in as the sympathetic savior who would take care of them privately. I heard the jingle of keys at the front door. Danielle was back, with the drinks. She walked in, beaming, holding 2 expensive cocktails with little umbrellas. "To the best boss in the world," she chirped, setting a glass on my desk. I looked at the drink. I looked at her, the girl who used to braid my hair. I realized then that I didn't know the woman standing in front of me at all. I was looking at a stranger who had been eating my life from the inside, smiling the whole time. "Priya sent an interesting email, Danielle," I said, my voice so flat it surprised me. The smile didn't fade all at once. It curdled. Slowly, like milk left in the sun, her face shifted from loving cousin to something sharp, cold, and entirely unrecognizable. She didn't look scared. She didn't look ashamed. She just set her own drink down and crossed her arms. "Well," she said, her voice dropping an octave, "I suppose it was only a matter of time before you noticed." The silence in the room wasn't quiet, it was deafening. It was the sound of a decade of memories being incinerated in a single second. I waited for her to apologize. I waited for her to tell me it was a joke, a misunderstanding, a lapse in judgment brought on by her unstable life. I waited for my cousin to come back, but she didn't. "How could you do this?" I whispered. My voice felt thin like paper. "I gave you everything. I paid your rent. I gave you a salary you didn't even have the experience for. I trusted you with my life's work." Danielle let out a short, dry laugh. She leaned against the doorframe, looking perfectly at ease. "You gave me a job, Mariah. You didn't give me a future. You sat in here playing the big shot CEO while I did the grunt work. I watched you sign the big checks while I was the one actually talking to the clients, keeping them happy while you were busy being successful. I was busy building the business that allowed you to have a job," I shouted, the fire finally breaking through the ice. "I spent 7 years in the trenches. You were here for 10 months. And in 10 months, I realized I'm better at this than you are," she said, her voice dropping into a chillingly calm tone. "You're too emotional. You're too soft. You think family means I owe you my life. No, family is just a back door. You left it unlocked and I walked in. If you didn't want to get robbed, you shouldn't have been so naive." The words felt like a physical slap. Naive. My kindness, my empathy, my history with her. To her, these weren't virtues, they were vulnerabilities. "I'm calling the police," I said, reaching for my desk phone. "This is theft. This is a violation of your non-disclosure agreement." Danielle didn't move. She just smiled, that same razor-thin tilt of the lips I had seen her give so many others. "Go ahead, call them. But before you do, you might want to check the server logs, or maybe the client contracts you had me organize last month. You'll find that a lot of those NDAs, they weren't actually signed. And the server? Well, sometimes things get accidentally deleted during a glitch, right?" I felt a cold sweat break across my neck. She had planned this. Every mistake with a file, every delay with a signature, it wasn't incompetence, it was forensic. She had been erasing the legal trail of her own betrayal while she sat right in front of me. "Why?" I asked, the words sounding small and broken. "Why me? Why your own blood?" She straightened up and walked toward the door, stopping just long enough to look back over her shoulder. The umbrella in her cocktail was still bobbing, a cheerful contrast to the darkness in her eyes. "Because I deserved success too, Mariah, and you were just standing in my way. You trusted the wrong person. Don't worry, I'll take good care of your clients. They already like me more anyway." She walked out, the click of her heels on the hardwood sounding like the final nails in a coffin. I stood there, surrounded by the expensive furniture and the high-rise views, realizing that I was standing in a hollow shell. My business was still there, but the heart had been cut out, and the person holding the knife was someone I had loved since we were children. When Danielle walked out that door, she didn't just take her belongings, she took the oxygen out of the room. I had spent 7 years building a fortress, but I learned the hard way that a fortress is only as strong as the people you let inside the gates. The weeks that followed were what I call the long winter. It wasn't just about the money, though the money was disappearing at a terrifying rate. It was about the silence. My phone, which used to buzz with notifications and thank you notes from happy clients, became a cold, heavy brick in my pocket. One by one, the emails came in. They were polite, professional, and devastating. "Dear Mariah, we've decided to move in a different direction. Hi, Mariah, we're restructuring our marketing budget and won't be renewing for next quarter." I knew exactly what different direction meant. It was a direction that led straight to Danielle's living room. She was undercutting my prices by 40% using my own proprietary strategy decks, the ones I had spent years refining to deliver my own services back to my clients. She wasn't just stealing the fruit, she was trying to dig up the tree. By the second month, the financial reality hit like a sledgehammer. My revenue had plummeted by over 60%. I had to sit my small team down, 3 people who had worked their hearts out for me, and tell them I couldn't afford to keep them. Watching them pack their boxes was worse than the betrayal itself. I felt like a failure. I felt like I had let down the very people who actually were loyal to me because I was too blinded by the person who wasn't. "I'm so sorry," I whispered as the last one, a bright designer named Leo, reached the door. "It's not your fault, Mariah," Leo said, pausing, "but you need to stop looking at the door she walked out of and start looking at the one that's still open." But I couldn't. I was paralyzed. I spent my days in a fugue state, sitting in a darkened office I could no longer afford, reading the legal letters from my lawyer that basically said we had no case. Danielle had been meticulous. The unsigned contracts, the glitched server logs, she had turned my own business into a labyrinth where I was the only one lost. I stopped eating. I stopped sleeping. I ignored calls from our mothers who were terrified and confused, caught in the crossfire of a war they didn't understand. My mother would call, crying, saying, "But she's your cousin, Mariah. Surely you can just talk it out." "There's nothing to talk about, Mom," I'd say, staring at a blank wall. "She didn't just take the business. She took the person I thought she was. That person never existed." Betrayal does something to your brain. It makes you a stranger to yourself. I started questioning every decision I'd ever made. Was I actually good at this, or was I just lucky until someone smarter came along? I looked at my reflection in the frosted glass and didn't see a CEO. I saw a girl who'd been played, a girl who was too soft for the world she'd tried to conquer. I was ready to give up. I had the closed sign in my hand, ready to tape it to the door. I thought that if I just let go, the pain would stop. But then, the phone rang. It wasn't a lawyer. It wasn't a bill collector. It was a voice I hadn't heard since the day Danielle started her cleanup of my inbox. The voice on the other end was like sandpaper, rough, familiar, and unapologetically blunt. "Mariah, it's Rodriguez. Are you done sulking yet?" I swallowed hard, my throat feeling like it was lined with lead. "Mr. Rodriguez, I I didn't think I'd hear from you again." "I don't like being lied to, Ellis. I told you that. And for a while, I thought you were the one doing the lying. I thought you'd grown a big head and started ignoring the man who helped you pay your first month's rent. But then I had a meeting this morning." My heart skipped. "A meeting? With who?" "With that cousin of yours, Danielle." He spat the name like it was a mouthful of spoiled milk. "She's been hounding me for weeks, offering me exclusive rates, telling me your agency was liquidating and that she was the only one who could save my data. She showed up at my site office today with a contract already printed. She's slick, I'll give her that. She's got that smile that makes you feel like you're doing her a favor by signing your life away." I sat up straighter, the cold fog in my brain finally starting to thin. Did she sign? "I'm a contractor, Mariah. I build things from the ground up. I know when a foundation is solid and when it's made of sawdust." I started asking her about the back-end logistics, the things you and I used to discuss at 3 in the morning when the server went down in 19. She didn't know a damn thing. She tried to pivot, tried to use that family charm, but she couldn't answer the technicals. She has your decks, she has your pricing, but she doesn't have your brain. There was a long pause on the line. I could hear the sound of his heavy breathing and the distant roar of a construction site. "She told me you were broken," Rodriguez said, his voice softening just a fraction. "She said you'd lost your edge. She said the business was already dead. But I'm looking at my books, and the best work I ever had came from your kitchen table. Now, I'm giving you 24 hours. You show up at my office tomorrow with a plan to fix the mess she made of my digital leads, or I'm going to a firm downtown. Don't let a parasite be the reason you bury a 7-year-old child, Mariah. It's embarrassing." The line went dead. I looked at the closed sign I had been holding. My fingers were cramped around the cardboard. I didn't feel the rush of joy I expected. I felt a cold, sharp, and terrifyingly clear anger. He was right. Danielle had the Ellis creative letterhead. She had the client list. She had the passwords. But she was a mimic. She was a ghost in the machine, playing a part she hadn't written. She understood the look of success, but she didn't understand the logic of it. She didn't know the late nights, the hidden coding fixes, the blood, sweat, and tears architecture that actually kept a business standing when the wind blew. I stood up. My legs felt weak, but my mind was finally, for the first time in months, focused. I walked over to the frosted glass door and looked at my name. "Unstable," I whispered to the empty room. "You think I'm unstable?" I reached out and ripped the closed sign in half. I didn't need a team of 10. I didn't need $1 million budget. I just needed to show my clients the difference between a master and a thief. I sat down at my desk, not the kitchen table, but the mahogany one I had earned, and I opened a new document. It was time to stop being the victim in Danielle's story. It was time to become the architect of her downfall. Danielle had made one fatal assumption. She thought that by stealing the what, she had stolen the how. She had my pitch decks, she had my pricing, and she had my templates. But a business isn't a static document. It's a living, breathing ecosystem of problem solving. And as the long winter transitioned into a cold, sharp spring, the problems began to pile up for her. I didn't go after her with a sledgehammer. I went after her with a scalpel. I started by auditing the server logs one more time, but I didn't look for what was deleted. I looked for what was left behind. In her haste to scrub her tracks, Danielle had forgotten about the automated backup redundancies I'd hard-coded into the system years ago. I found the digital trail of her private meetings with Priya and the others. I found the time-stamped evidence of her accessing proprietary data while she was still on my payroll. Then I reached out to the leavers. I didn't call them to beg for their business back. I called them as a consultant, providing a complimentary security audit for former clients. "Priya," I said when she finally picked up the phone. Her voice was hesitant, layered with the guilt of someone who knew they'd done me wrong. "I'm not here to talk about the contract. I'm here because the systems you're currently using, the ones Danielle migrated you to, are built on my proprietary API. And because she doesn't have the administrative keys to the back-end updates, your customer data is currently unencrypted. You're sitting on a massive security leak." The silence on the other end was pure, unadulterated terror. She told me everything was secure. She said she was the one who built the encryption. "She built the interface, Priya. I built the engine, and she doesn't know how to change the oil." Within 48 hours, the independent strategy Danielle had sold was starting to smoke at the edges. One by one, the clients she had stolen realized they weren't getting a lower-priced version of Ellis Creative Solutions. They were getting a counterfeit that was actively endangering their businesses. I spent my nights drafting correction reports. I showed them exactly where Danielle had cut corners. I showed them the broken links, the mismatched branding, and the strategic errors that were costing them leads. I didn't badmouth her. I didn't have to. I let her own incompetence be the character witness. The turning point came on a Thursday morning. I was sitting in Mr. Rodriguez's site office, a dusty trailer filled with the smell of blueprints and diesel. I handed him a single sheet of paper. "This is the recovery plan," I said. "It fixes the lead generation leak Danielle created, and it integrates your new payroll system, something she told you was impossible to do with an extra $10,000 fee." Rodriguez looked at the paper, then looked at me. He didn't smile, but he gave a sharp, single nod. "She told me you were too far gone to think this clearly." "I was half right," I said, leaning back. "I was gone, but I'm back, and I brought the keys." As I walked out of the trailer, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number, but I knew the voice immediately. "What are you doing, Mariah? You're harassing my clients. Stop now or I'll see you in court." I didn't reply. I just looked up at the cranes over the construction site, reaching into the sky. Danielle was finally feeling the heat. She was realized that stealing a map is useless if you don't know how to read the terrain. The Golden Girl was starting to tarnish, and the real architect was just getting started on the renovation. There is a specific kind of silence that happens right before a structure collapses. It's the sound of the last support beam snapping. For Danielle, that beam was the one thing she could never replicate, the labor. She had convinced my clients that the work was easy, that I was just a middleman taking a cut while she did the heavy lifting. But she was about to learn that heavy lifting isn't just typing. It's the constant, invisible maintenance of a digital ecosystem. Because I had built the back end of Ellis Creative from scratch, I knew exactly where the tripwires were. I didn't have to hack her. I just had to stop fixing the automated errors that she didn't even know existed. By Monday, the calls started coming in, not to her, but to me. "Mariah, my website is throwing 404 errors on every checkout page," Priya cried over the phone, her voice thick with panic. "Danielle says it's a server-side issue, but she doesn't know how to access the host files. We've lost $3,000 in sales since breakfast." I took a slow sip of tea. That's because the encryption handshake requires a manual reset every 90 days for security. I used to do that at 4 a.m. while you were asleep, Priya. Danielle probably thought it was just a glitch she could ignore. Can you fix it? I can, I said firmly, but I don't work on systems managed by third parties. You'll have to officially terminate your independent agreement with her and return to Ellis Creative. My rates have returned to the standard professional level. No family discounts, no shortcuts. Priya didn't hesitate. Send the contract, now. The dominoes fell with a speed that was almost dizzying. Danielle had sold herself as a cheaper, better version of me, but she had failed to realize that when you sell cheap, you are held to a standard of perfection you can't afford to maintain. She was a one-woman show trying to run an agency's workload, and she was drowning. She began missing deadlines, she sent out newsletters with broken links, she even accidentally billed one client for another client's work, a cardinal sin in the agency world. The reputation she had tried to build by tearing mine down was now a weight around her neck. On Wednesday, the house of cards finally met its gust of wind. I was at my desk when the front door of the office swung open. There was no knock. Danielle marched in, looking like a ghost of the woman who'd walked out months ago. Her designer suit was wrinkled and her eyes were rimmed with red. She slammed a folder onto my desk. "You're blackballing me," she screamed, her voice cracking. "You're telling them the systems are broken. You're sabotaging my career." I didn't stand up. I didn't even look away from my monitor. "I'm not sabotaging anything, Danielle. I'm simply no longer providing the free labor that kept your lies afloat. You told them you were doing the work. I just let you actually try to do it." "They're all leaving, Mariah. Every single one of them. Even Priya. I have bills. I have a lease." I finally looked up at her. I didn't feel the anger anymore. I just felt a profound sense of clarity. "You told me I trusted the wrong person, and you were right. But you made a bigger mistake. You trusted a thief's ability to maintain what she stole. You can steal a car, Danielle, but that doesn't make you a mechanic." "We're family," she wailed, falling back on the old, reliable weapon. "How can you do this to your own blood?" I said, "You killed that argument the day you deleted Mr. Rodriguez's emails." Standing up, "You didn't see me as family when you were calling my business unstable. You saw me as a ladder, and now the ladder is gone." I pointed to the door, the one with my name etched in the glass. "Get out of my office. If you contact me or my clients again, my lawyer will move from security audits to criminal litigation. And Danielle, don't bother calling our mothers. I've already sent them the server logs. They finally know exactly what kind of chance you took." She stared at me, her mouth hanging open, realization finally sinking in. She had no more moves, no more flattery, no more glitches to hide behind. She turned and walked out, stumbling slightly on the rug she used to brag about vacuuming. The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't the silence of a long winter. It was the quiet, steady hum of a machine that was finally, after months of sabotage, running exactly the way it was designed to. The rebuilding didn't happen overnight. It wasn't a movie montage where the lights flickered back on and everything was suddenly perfect. It was a slow, deliberate process of repair. It was about cleaning up the digital debris Danielle had left behind and, more importantly, mending the fractured trust with the clients who had stayed. But something had changed in the DNA of Ellis Creative. Mr. Rodriguez came back first, bringing 3 of his biggest associates with him. "I like a fighter, Mariah," he told me over a signed contract that was worth twice the original. Priya followed, and while our relationship was professional, the mentorship was gone, replaced by a mutual, hard-earned respect. Within 6 months, my revenue wasn't just back to where it was, it had surpassed my best year. I hired my team back, Leo, Maya, and Sarah. I gave them raises, and more importantly, I gave them transparency. We built a culture where the keys to the castle were shared, not because I was naive, but because we had a system of accountability that made a Danielle impossible. As for Danielle, the fallout was absolute. She tried to start another independent agency, but the word had spread. In the small world of high-end marketing, your reputation is your currency, and hers was bankrupt. I heard she eventually left the city, moving back to a small town where our family's history couldn't be used as a shield. My mother and her mother don't speak much anymore, which is a quiet tragedy I've had to accept. But my mother finally looked at the server logs. She saw the deleted emails, she saw the private contracts, and for the first time, she stopped saying, "But she's family." She realized that some people use the word family as a skeleton key to open doors they intend to rob. The biggest lesson I learned wasn't about contracts or servers or NDAs. It was about the nature of success itself. Danielle thought she could steal my success because she saw it as an object, a list of names, a set of files, a dollar amount in a bank account. She didn't understand that success is a skill set. It's the late nights at the kitchen table. It's the ability to solve a problem at 4 a.m. when the world is sleeping. It's the integrity that makes a client like Mr. Rodriguez come back, even after you've been sabotaged. She could copy the blueprint, but she could never be the architect. I still have that closed sign, ripped in half, framed in my private office. It's not a trophy, it's a reminder. It reminds me that resilience isn't about never falling. It's about what you do with the bricks when the house comes down. You don't just put them back where they were. You use them to build something taller, something stronger, something that can't be burned down by a familiar voice. My name is Mariah Ellis. I built a business from a kitchen table, I watched my own blood try to dismantle it, and I stood my ground while it crumbled. I am still here, and this time, the foundation isn't just solid, it's unbreakable. Thank you for walking through the fire with Mariah. This story is a reminder that while betrayal can damage your progress, it can never destroy your spirit, unless you let it. If you've ever had to rebuild something that someone else tried to tear down, you know that the second version is always stronger than the first. If Mariah's journey from the kitchen table to the high rise and back again resonated with you, please consider supporting the channel so we can keep sharing these stories of resilience. Hit the like button to show that you stand with the architects, not the thieves. Share this video with anyone who needs to know that their talent is something that can never be stolen. And make sure to subscribe to Echoes of Trust and Betrayal and turn on the notification bell. We have many more chapters to share, and we don't want you to miss a single one.